We're going to start in verse 9 in just a moment. So glad to have you here today. I did not start pastoring until I was 30 years old, and I was a Christian in my 20s. And the church that I was a part of, every time there was a holiday weekend, anything even remotely resembling a holiday weekend, our pastor would schedule someone else to preach or a guest to preach, and he would be gone. And I had no intention of pastoring a church, didn't want to. And didn't want to, but when I started pastoring a church, I decided right up front that we are going to be here. Nate or I are going to be preaching whenever possible, 100% of every holiday weekend, because I absolutely dreaded holidays during those years because we had a great preacher and he would always bring in someone who was lame. That didn't even come close to his preaching, and that always bummed me out every holiday weekend. So thank you for being here on this very long weekend. Glad to have you here today. Romans chapter 12, we're going to read 9 through 13. Don't just pretend to love others. Really love them. Hate what is wrong. Hold tightly to what is good. Love each other with genuine affection and take delight in honoring each other. Never be lazy, but work hard and serve the Lord enthusiastically. Rejoice in our confident hope. Be patient in trouble and keep on praying. When God's people are in need, be ready to help them. Always be eager to practice hospitality. You may be seated. Remember, Paul's letter made it to Rome, maybe through Phoebe, who he mentions in chapter 16, and the way he mentions it, but we really don't know who got the letter from where Paul was to Rome, but is to be circulated among the Christians, and we know there were far too many followers of Christ around the Roman Empire for them to all hear the letter read at one time. So for weeks or months, or maybe even a year or two, Paul's letter would make its rounds from place to place within the Roman Empire, and Christians would gather and hear this letter read. It would be from house to house where Christians were gathering regularly. It would be in courtyards around the Roman Empire where people would gather and listen to this letter read from Paul, Christians specifically. We even have historical proof that around the Roman Empire there were meeting rooms that people could rent, and maybe it was being read one night at a house, another night in a courtyard, back to a different house around Rome, then maybe being read, a meeting room rented, or maybe someone had access to a workshop to where 20 or 30 people could gather. And it's being passed around Rome to be read. Anywhere a gathering of people, of Christians, could be squeezed in until every last one of them had the opportunity to hear this letter read all the way through in one sitting. And on this particular night, for us this morning, the reading came to the home of Quintus Aurelius, who is not a real person, but he's going to help me illustrate for you something that is very powerful for us to understand the rest of this book on this holiday weekend. And before we step into the house of Quintus Aurelius, I want to ask you something. Did your family honor the calling of shotgun? Huh? I mean, did you honor that? There are very clear rules to it. I see Chris Powell shaking his head yes, but he's from Georgia, and what he thought I meant is when they see something in the yard, whoever sees it first can grab the shotgun and shoot it. This is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about calling the front passenger seat of the car, Chris. The rules were understood by everyone. You had to be outside to call it. You can't call it from inside the house. You had to visibly be able to see the car. You couldn't call it 3 hours early from your bedroom. And you had to call it shotgun. And for your siblings, your cousins, your friends, a bunch of sweaty teenagers piling into a minivan, if you were the first one to call it within the rules, you claim the honor of riding in the front passenger seat of the car and everyone else had to pile somewhere else. That is claimed honor. Whoever yelled it, and everyone else had to accept it. We understand that, but in Rome, honor worked completely differently. Honor was ascribed to you. Meaning the culture would tell you, Rome would tell you. If you were born into a certain family, you had that amount of honor. And that set the ceiling for how much honor you were ever going to achieve in your life. And you could achieve honor, you could increase a little bit within honor, but you really couldn't bump above your ceiling. You could achieve some honor through a title that you received, from an office that you held, maybe from acquiring some wealth through your business or your military service. But even that honor really depended on the class of honor that you started in. And this is really a little bit of a foreign concept to us. And the status of the honor that you held in Rome was displayed in many ways, including where you got to sit, in public spaces, in meeting spaces. And it also applied to family homes. Rome had already ranked you, any room that you walked into, where you stood, where you sat, at public meetings, in gatherings, in homes for dinner, was based upon the rank that had been ascribed to you through the empire of Rome and through their culture. And in Rome, there was no calling shotgun. That's my point. In Rome, it was all, when you come into someone's house or a meeting space or a dinner or a dining area, and you can actually picture this in a lot of different places in the New Testament. You'll see what I'm talking about play out. It was all about the couches. Literally all about the couches. Look at the picture on slide 2. It was all about the couches. A formal dining room in a Roman house was called a triclinium, which literally means 3 couches. The name of the dining room in houses all across the Roman Empire was referred to as their triclinium. And like in America, you know how you have family rooms set up one way and dining rooms set up another way, and it runs across our culture coast to coast. And you can be looking at a $300,000 house in Ohio, and you walk in and they go, here's the dining room, and you kind of recognize the setup. Here's the family room. You recognize the setup. You see about where the TV is and where the furniture is. And then you can go to a $80 million house somewhere else in the country and walk in, and it might be the size of this room, but you'll basically see the same setup. It'll all be familiar with you because it's just part of the culture. And in the dining room in Rome and across the empire, whether it was in an apartment or a house or a large house of a wealthy person, it was all the same throughout the culture. Where you sat and which couch you sat on, and literally which position on which couch you sat on, was just automatically known. When you walked into a room, you looked around and saw who was there, you knew where you were going to be seated because everyone knew what honor had been ascribed to them through the Roman Empire. And the couch you were given and the place you were assigned on that couch wasn't like you walked in and the host said, well, you sit here, you sit here, you sit here, you sit here. No, it was just part of the ethos. Kind of like when does shotgun get overridden? The kid goes running in the car, 3 or 4 of them, shotgun, and you go, nope, your grandmother's with us today. You know what I mean? We just automatically understand. Or the kids may not even yell shotgun because they know grandma's with them. It was that type of thing. Everyone just knew and understood it. It was a part of the ethos of the culture. So we want to know that honor had geography in every single room, and everyone in the culture knew it. Now let's learn a little more about Quintus Aurelius, my historically informed character, who I'm using to help us understand a little bit better what's going on here specifically in verse 10. He was born into an extremely wealthy family who had earned their money through international trade. So Quintus Aurelius was already in a wealthy family when he was born. And after that, as he was growing up, he went from that position to being able to buy a bunch of presses for olives to be able to create his own olive oil. So he had an olive oil press business and was also selling olive oil, and he made a lot more wealth for himself on top of his family wealth. And in that, he gained more honor. He's not able to get out of the wealthy merchant status, but because he had created this business for himself, he had a lot of honor because of his own small fortune that he had created on top of already being born in a wealthy merchant family. Now, here's what I want you to imagine. I want you to imagine Quintus becoming a follower of Jesus through Priscilla and Aquila, who we hear about, I believe, in 1 Corinthians chapter 16, if I'm remembering correctly. Before Claudius expelled the Jews from Rome, which is what we're hearing about over there in 1 Corinthians. But before that happened, imagine before Priscilla and Aquila got to Paul, and we know they're in Rome living in life and doing ministry and spreading the gospel. Just imagine that they come across Quintus, and they come across his olive presses and his olive oil, and they were tent makers and leather workers, and they decided with Quintus to trade some of their leather goods for some of his olive oil, and now they're in a business relationship. And their business relationship become conversations, and then the conversations between Priscilla and Aquila and Quintus became a friendship. And somewhere along the way, they shared the good news of Jesus the Messiah with Quintus, this rich merchant who they had become friends with, and he believed. Now just follow me on this. Quintus is sitting on the couch for us this morning, on the main couch on the back of the screen. So he comes to Christ through Priscilla and Aquila before the emperor had kicked the Jews out of Rome in our imaginary story this morning. And he begins going to their house to gather with other Christians to learn about the ways and teachings of Jesus. And maybe he's been doing this for a year or two, and then the emperor says, we're going to kick all the Jews out of Rome. Kicks all the Jews out of Rome. But he's been meeting at their house with a bunch of other Christians for a while. And now all the Jews are out of Rome, and they're gone. They're not in their home anymore. And imagine Quintus Aurelius saying, you know what, guys? Let's start meeting at my house. So he began hosting a group of Christians on a regular basis, all Gentile Christians, because the Jews had been kicked out. For 5 years, he's leading this group of Christians in his home while there's hundreds of other groups meeting around the Roman Empire, if not thousands of other groups and people meeting around the empire. But here they are in his house on this particular night that we're talking about, this afternoon that we're talking about. And then after 5 years of the Jews being expelled, they come back. Paul's letter has arrived. The Jewish and Gentile Christians are gathering together soon. And on this afternoon at his house, he is hosting the reading of Paul's letter. For the last month, it's been going to other places, and it's finally made it to his house where his group of believers are meeting and where the Gentile Christians had been meeting there with him for 5 years in our imaginary story. And as you can know, as the well-honored son from a wealthy merchant family who on top of that created his own oil press business for olives, is his own self a wealthy merchant, he is the honored one in Rome, the one with the most honor that's there on this night. So he's on the couch with the highest honor. Now, follow me across this picture on the screen. Past the medium couch there in the middle that the couple guys are sitting on. Past the so-so couch on the far right of your scene, just kind of depicted as what looks like to us an ottoman. And if you're under 50, an ottoman is what you put your feet on. It's like a footstool. I'm embarrassed to know that word. So go from the place of honor to a lower place of honor, to a lower place of honor, and then even lower places of honor, the benches that are around the room. And over by the door, you see a street vendor standing there, and behind him in the white is a slave named Davis. Because the street vendor has more honor than Davis. Davis is the one standing behind him and standing closest to the door. And Davus was the property of another wealthy merchant a few streets away from Quintus. And that's how he became aware of the reading of Paul's letter at Quintus's house on this particular afternoon. So as a follower of Christ, this slave came to Quintus's home and is standing back by the door behind the street vendor. And Davus owned nothing, he was owned. In the eyes of Rome, he was property. Sure, he was property that breathed, but in the honor-shame culture, he was just property. He was a tool for his owner, but he just happened to have a tongue. He just happened to have lungs. And in Rome's ledger of who counts and who doesn't, in this room, Davus, in the eyes of Rome, just didn't. So he comes into this gathering of Paul's reading and just automatically knows where he's supposed to be in Rome. He's supposed to be standing by the door behind everyone else. Now, I want you to take Quintus on the couch and Davus in the white over by the door and hold them in your mind and look around the room for a second. And see the scroll in the middle. They have just been sitting through an hour and a half of hearing Paul's letter read to where we've gotten so far. They've heard what we call chapter 1, verse 1, read all the way through chapter 12, chapter 9. They've been sitting there the whole time. Quintus reclining where Rome says he belongs in the honor system. Davus standing where Rome says he belongs in the honor system. Everyone in the room is subconsciously, it's just part of the ethos, quietly agreeing with that arrangement. Because that's just how it works in Rome. And then they get to verse 10 on our screen over here. Love each other with genuine affection and take delight in what? Honoring each other. I meant to and didn't ask you to read through these verses this week because I just wanted to make the point as you read through 9 through 13, you read that and go, oh, nice. Yeah, that's great. Church, love each other with genuine affection and honor each other. Great. No problem with that. Oh, man. I have had so much fun geeking out on this and how this was falling on the ears and the people of our imaginary room here that is a literal representation of what was going on all over the empire as this letter is being read. I absolutely love this. And I sat there picturing, love each other with genuine affection, take delight in honoring each other. We go, yeah. And then I thought about this and went, picture Quintus sitting over there on the couch, leaned back. His cup gets filled first by his servant. Take delight, Paul? Are you serious? And honoring each other? For Quintus, that would have landed on his ears like someone running in and giving him the news that there was rancid oil in your presses. That's how that would have hit him. Doesn't hit us that way when we're just reading through it real quick and moving on with our day. Okay, love each other, honor each other. I'll move on from there. Quintus understood honor the way that Rome did. There was only so much of it to go around. And in Rome, honor was like a loaf of bread. If you had a loaf of bread of honor and you took a slice and you gave that honor to someone else, it was gone. I mean, honor was a commodity in the empire. So honoring up, yes, that's acceptable. That's an exception because it's transactional. You can honor up. You would flatter the magistrate. You would kiss the ring of the senator because in honoring up, that honor shined back on you. So yeah, you could honor up. But honoring down, to have the cup of Davus filled first, as an excuse to take a drink. Heck, for Davus to even be given a cup as a slave, getting off of that couch that Quintus is on and waving a slave over to sit on it, unthinkable. And Paul is saying here to them, and applies to us, honor everyone in Rome that is here to read this letter, that is followers of Christ, love each other. He's talking directly to believers here from Gentile backgrounds, from Jewish backgrounds, from pagan backgrounds, who have all come together to follow Christ. And he's saying, honor each other. Why? Because Paul knew from Priscilla and Aquila as he was writing this letter that there was all kinds of tension and strife going on in the church of Rome once the Jews returned. There's a lot of tension happening here. And Quintus could practically feel his and his family's honor leaking out the door by Davos. He's supposed to honor Davos in the way that Davos is supposed to honor him. Come on, man. This, Paul, I like the stuff you said back in chapter 8, but this, give me a break. Because Paul is reaching for what we don't always catch, but is the most honored currency in the Roman Empire, and that is honor. Honor goes hand in hand with wealth in the Roman Empire, but honor is just a fraction even more important to them in the economy of their lives than wealth. And he's telling them to take the most important currency of the Roman Empire, and that is the honor that's ascribed to you, and give it, even to Davos. Even to the people the empire had crossed off. But Paul's naming right here in this one single verse an infection in the bloodstream of the church. Rome's honor and shame system. They'd been trained to rank each other subconsciously and consciously. We hear it in some of the stories of Jesus of, oh, that person over there and that scribe and Pharisee up there and that lowly person over there. We see it all throughout the New Testament. To know who mattered more, and who barely mattered at all. And Paul is prescribing the antibiotic here in chapter 12, and specifically in chapter 10, or chapter 12, verse 10, where we are today. Rome does not get to arrange the room for followers of Christ. That's big stuff. In this one verse, in a nation that was built on the hierarchy of honor, Paul does what he does in all of his writing. He completely flattens any hierarchy in the life of followers of Christ, in the life of the church. And these Roman house churches and courtyards and meeting spaces, it was mixed with senators, freeborn, freedmen, slaves under one roof. And now he's saying, what I want you to do is to delight in honoring everyone in the room as equals. It's tough. I mean, you hear me telling you, but we can't emotionally wrap our mind around what's going on here and how this is landing on them, on what this is the beginning of what a living sacrifice looks like. It's not just between you and God. A living sacrifice is to take what Rome considers a currency for you to hoard for yourself and give it away to others. And he flattens the hierarchy in that. He's saying in the original language, outdo one another in honoring each other. You see, Rome's culture was outdo each other in trying to receive honor and earn honor and get honor and take honor from other people and bestow it on yourself. If you could beat them in a business deal, you were taking some of their honor and you were receiving it on yourself. And Paul says, what I want you guys to do is race in giving honor to other people. Quintus Aurelius and Davos and all the believers in Rome, Paul is saying, are equal when you come out of the baptismal waters and have it dripping off of you. You've all been buried with Christ, raised as equals from the watery grave into, as he says in much of his writings, the family of God. So what about us? We still know how to rank people, don't we? We know who impresses us. We know who annoys us. We know who's useful. We know who's not useful. And we certainly know how to ignore the second group. So how does this simple verse of 12:10 challenge us that honor, we keep honor them. What's that? What's he really saying? What's that mean? He's saying from Quintus on one side of the room to Davos on the other side of the room. Give dignity to the other person by giving them your attention, your ear, your words, your time, an invitation to your seat, an invitation to your table. Like honor is not something like we go, oh, good person. No, that's not honor. Honor is spending time with them for who they are, listening to them, inviting them into the spaces that everyone else thinks, well, that's your space. You've earned that. You deserve that. And going to the Davoses across the room, the people that annoy us, the people who have nothing to offer for us, the people who can't enter into a transactional relationship, they just got nothing for us, to go over across the room and grab a hold of their robe metaphorically and pull them into the space where you are and say, hey, take this chair I was sitting in, I'm going to sit on this stool right here and tell me about your week. Tell me about what's going on. And you actually give honor by spending the currency of your time, your eyes, your ears, your attention. That's how you give honor. It's not just like, hey, Janessa, I honor you. Oh, man, thanks a lot, Greg. What's that mean if I had never given her attention or time or words? It means nothing. It's just paying lip service. Honor, keep us in your mind, is giving them your time. Notice we all instinctively rate people that we kind of feel like's below us. No matter how long you've been a Christian, this is a part of us that just comes naturally. We may not write out a list of who we feel like deserves our time and who doesn't deserve our time, because if it did fall out of your paper Bible at life group, it'd be a little embarrassing. One side, people who deserve my time. Other side, people who don't deserve my time. That'd be embarrassing, right? So we don't write it down. But when we encounter people and run into people and see people, and we think about who we're inviting to our house for dinner or who we're taking out to lunch and who we're not, we got a list. But we know who we're going to give extra attention to because of their job, their income, the role that they play at the church. And we know who we quietly ignore because of their lack of whatever. Lack of education, lack of money, abundance and social awkwardness. We're just like, they don't deserve my time. And honor the person who can't advance you. The one who needs more than they can give. That is one of the greatest blessings in serving in the life of the church, is being able to give to people who literally do not have the ability to give back to you in a way that's beneficial to you. But it's also one of the most difficult transformational heart issues for believers too. And it happens throughout all our life. This isn't something you cover your first year of following Christ. You may knock it out for a while, and all of a sudden, God brings a mother-in-law into your life 12 years later after you've already dealt with this, and you realize, I can't stand that woman. And now you're right back to square one, not with everyone else, but with her. And stop confusing usefulness with people's worth. Some people are easy to value because they can do things. They can lead, they can teach, they can give, they can organize, they can fix stuff, they can make decisions, they can serve our team. But the church is not a machine. A person's worth is not measured by how helpful they are to your team's ministry. Yes, that matters. That's a whole other subject. But when it comes to giving people your time, attention, and honor, that's not a part of the equation. Because baptism is what equalizes us. Before rich, before poor, before polished, before messy, before useful, before difficult, before leader, volunteer, giver, non-giver, struggler, new believer, young believer, old believer, impressive life story, complicated current story that's going to complicate your life. Baptism got there first. Buried with Christ, raised with Christ, named with Christ, brought in to share in the same family. So when the world hands us a seating chart, Romans 12:10 hands it back. In the first half of verse 10, which we haven't got to yet, says, love each other with, next two words, Genuine affection. We cannot translate that into English as thick as it is in the Greek. And the word that's used in the Greek, everyone sitting in that room would have heard the affection of a 6-year-old sister hugging, nurturing, and caring for her little brother. Now, a lot of us have come from messed up families, have screwed up siblings, have less intelligent siblings maybe. But that's not what we're talking about. So even if your family was screwed up or your siblings were screwed up or whatever, don't think about them. Think about the way that you know it can and should be among siblings. Picture that. That's the word he's using here in Philostrogus. Genuine affection. Picture a father's heart who's never cried a day since she's been alive, but on this particular day, they're standing back there where no one can see them in the hallway, and bridesmaids are lined up behind her, or in front of her, getting ready to go down the aisle, and her dad are standing there at the end of that line. And for the first time in her life, she looks over and sees a tear trickle down his face. That is the genuine affection that he's talking about here. And yeah, he's talking about you guys, since I already mentioned him, I can do it again. He's talking about how you guys should feel about Chris. That's that genuine affection. Picture a mother waking up with her newborn infant in the crib, maybe 8 weeks old, and she gets out of bed, and as she's leaning over to reach down that baby, the thoughts and the feelings and the emotions that runs through her body, that's the word in the Greek that he's using for genuine affection. The warm, tender word that Greeks used that ran between family members. Now think about that falling on Quintus's ears and Davos over in the corner. You guys are to honor each other in the way that I just described. He isn't describing the church in Rome, as we often do in America, as a group of people who meet weekly for a scheduled event that just happens to have some people singing, a band playing, a teaching from the Bible, some people praying together, some people giving their money for the work of ministry. And then we go back on with our lives. That's not at all what he's talking about. And then he stacks on top of it love. Philadelphia is the word there. Each other with genuine affection, that brotherly love. He isn't describing the church in Rome as a club. He's describing it, as he does through most of his writing in the New Testament, as a literal Christian family. You might not like your brothers or sisters, but wouldn't you love to like them? Don't you wish when you see brothers and sisters that have just these amazing relationships, or brothers or sisters or whatever at 6 years old, and then you see it at 14, and then you see it at 20, and then they're in their 40s, and they're still going to do things together, and they love each other. That, regardless of your sibling relationship, that's what Paul is saying. You get that in the life of New Start. And you get to give that in the life of New Start. He's describing us as family. Even though no one in this room is family now because of the baptismal waters that drenched off of their robes, they are now Christ's family. Multiracial, multi-ethnic, multi-economic, multi-educated, multi-everything. The ground is level at the foot of the cross. The whole Roman Empire ran on honor. And who sat where, who stood where at dinner, and Paul says, nope, this is your family. There's no seating chart in this room anymore. So why did I spend an entire sermon on a holiday weekend on just the second half of verse 10 of chapter 12? Because it's so easy for us to miss that Paul, after 11 chapters of theology, and in the beginning of 12, saying, so that because of that, you're going to look like a living sacrifice. And where he starts with what a living sacrifice is going to look like is with the antibiotic for the infection of Rome's honor system that was permeating the life of the church and was a foundational cause in all of their tension, that Paul is saying this new honor system of brothers and sisters in the family of God and the ground is level is the spiritual posture you're going to need to face everything I'm about to teach you in the rest of this letter. You need this antibiotic first. And from the end of verse 10, the beginning of verse 11, to the end of the letter, Paul is going to walk straight into the stuff that was pulling the church apart, causing tension, impacting their work for the ministry of God, arguments over what they're supposed to eat and what they're supposed to drink. You see, that was at the root of that was a shame, honor, culture thing. And some religious issues there too. Holy days. Judging believers we disagree with. The role of the government among believers. And everyone being sure that they saw all the issues that Paul's about to talk about. They all, if you'd asked any of them sitting in that room, they all thought they saw it correctly. And Paul's going to show, nope, these are some issues you guys are having in the church, and this is what it looks like. And before he gets to the tension points among them, Paul tells them how they're going to have to approach it. The people they are frustrated with who are followers of Christ because of their disagreements, because of the Jews coming back into the church 5 years later, because of all the tension that's happening there. So when the next argument comes up, and the tension comes up, for those of you meeting in Rome, reading this letter everywhere, the question is no longer who is right, and it is certainly not who outranks whom in honor. The question is, how do I go first in honoring my brother or sister in Christ? You see, throughout their entire lifetimes, these guys' grandparents were not raised in church. They weren't raised in a Christian culture. This was new to them. We've had 2,000 years of Christian culture, and we intellectually understand that everything's to be equal in the grounds level of the cross. We still struggle with it internally and carnally, so we still need to preach it and teach it and deal with it in our lives. But for these people, they're all, quote unquote, new believers, so to speak. All of them are. And this is new information for all of them, speaking directly to their culture. And if we understand this before we move on through the rest of Romans, if we don't understand this, if we just read past this and keep going, the rest of Romans is going to sound like an arbitrary list of rules that Paul is giving the Romans in order to just go, hey kids, stop fighting. Here's the rules I'm going to give you. You have to agree on that. The rest of Romans can feel that way if we don't see it in the context that I've shared with us this morning. Now we can read the rest of Romans and teach the rest of Romans as Paul applying the first 11 chapters of theology to divided believers. It's not a list of rules, it's how to live as one family in a culture that tribalizes you and divides you. You think that's got some application for us? Absolutely. And we're going to get into it for the next, 6, 8, 10, 12, 15 weeks. We don't know yet, and I'm excited about it. Amen. Let's stand, and we're going to spend some time worshiping and praying and doing some stuff this morning.